go back all the way to when our ancestors came to Hawaii. They were presented with Hawaii and its resources. And from that, they forged their way of life. So I feel like we gotta recognize what's happening, just as our ancestors did when they got here.
The Hawaiians knew there was a connection between mauka and makai. They knew that what they did on land was going to affect the nearshore and maybe even further out.
This part of Molokai, from Kawela to Kanakakai, is really dear to me because this is where I learned to hunt.
Some of the resources that we utilize in this area, hunting, deer, pig, goat.
The more mauka area up in Kamako and just below Kamako are dominated by ohia forest. And then you come into a narrow zone of native shrubland where it's much drier.
The a'ali'i has the most beautiful purple-black seed pods. The ilima here is the most silvery and furry of all ilimas on Molokai. I think one of the most beautiful things about this area is the way the mountains come right down to the ocean to this amazing reef system that we have right offshore here.
Molokai South Shore Fringing Reef is the longest continuous fringing reef in the whole United States. We all know that that's our main food resource.
That's what makes it more unique down here. We get fishes that we don't have on the North Shore, and we have more varieties.
When I was a little boy, I used to go with my Uncle David Rollins and lay the net out, and we'd pick up the net, go home to my Uncle David's house and have dinner.
Early in the morning, my grandfather used to wake up and walk on the beach, and he would gather whatever limu that was given from the ocean. That's what we would prepare and eat for the day.
To walk from shore, cast your pole, throw your net, go look for the limu you like. Super convenient. Now you have runoff. Yeah.
The thing stays muddy forever, it seems like. We get a couple sand patches here and there before the reef. Other than that, it's all mud.
As a youth growing up here, I've heard it many times, people saying, we gotta do something about the goats. They're eating away our vegetation, our land is washing in the ocean.
This is what it used to look like before. We used to call it a moonscape, just dirt and rock, because of the heavy animal browsing.
The rainy season is come and all that unanchored soil, topsoil, is running down into our ocean.
Just the Kawela stream during the winter floods was dumping thousands of tons of sedimentation into the ocean per year. That's a lot.
So I started looking at the Molokai South Shore reefs in 1999. We developed the Coral Reef Assessment and Monitoring Program, and we looked at 60 different sites throughout the state. Kamiloloa and Kawela area stood up as the highest sediment in the state.
So if you have too much mud, too much sediment, the baby corals just can't sit down on the mud very easily, right? They have nothing to hold on to. The limu also can't survive. So limu need to have the same type of clear, fresh water that the corals and the baby fish do.
So runoff kills the reef, which in turn kills the animals that live in the reef, or they push out and they go elsewhere. To control the mountain and its effects of runoff and erosion benefits the ocean. Yeah, you stop the runoff, the rivers run clean, the ocean is clear. You don't need 1 degree for know that.
These areas would, when wet, that overland flow, that dirt would just go down just because there was nothing holding it back from coming down.
We had to do something to protect the ocean. The intent was mauka to makai. Yeah, you take care of mauka, you would take care of makai.
In 1999, we formed the East Molokai Watershed Partnership. And I proposed the very first conservation fence.
Had people opposed to that in the beginning, then I thought to myself, before you even make any kind of judgment, maybe you should go do your homework first.
I sat down and talked stories with the brothers from the Ahupua'a, from that area, and asked them if they could come up with a management plan for hunting. And then they took control.
In 2003, Kawela Plantation Homeowners Association became part of the East Molokai Watershed Partnership. Also in that year, John Stock and Jim Jacoby approached me and we had a meeting.
We went over there to really look at a little bit more closely the situation on that south slope there and the factors involved in the sedimentation.
Here we are at the USGS monitoring site. You can see the box down there. The USGS didn't pick this spot at random. It was actually one of the worst sites in the area.
We put a number of instruments that would help us measure how fast the land was lowering and how much sediment was coming out. We incorporated community knowledge by talking to the elders that had been there, by talking to people who had experience during runoff events. What we discovered by this process of mapping and then monitoring is that on a given year, 5 to 15 hours of rainfall was responsible for bringing all those tons and tons of sediment down to Molokai's reefs.
When he first started, one of the things we were able to do is build a small little fenced area. Within 6 months to certainly by a year, we were really surprised to see what was coming up in the fenced areas. The vegetation was much more dense than inside than it was outside, where you still had the goat pressure and so forth. And the surprising thing to me was the fact that most of the things that were coming back, even from this almost barren landscape, were native species. You had this diversity that included a veo, it included a naio, a'ali'i, ilima, and kakonakona.
2006, they started monitoring. 2007, we completed the Kawela fence, came halfway down the mountain and went across and joined the Kamalo Kapule fence.
The state crew is the lead on the fence construction. It's a lot of work to be doing fences like this, but it's some of the most important work to protect these areas.
In those early years after the fence was constructed, it was dramatic to look down and see that line of demarcation between a forest, dark green forested section and a brown bare dirt moonscape. And it really went to show how important it was to separate the animals from the watershed.
And there were literally thousands of goats. So in 2009, they started cutting down the goat numbers.
As they reduced the amount of animals on the outside, we were getting native species coming back outside the fenced area. Very limited in terms of the species, but the cover was getting there.
They came out with their first report. We were truly amazed. It went from pretty much zero ground cover to about over 80% ground cover. And 75% of the ground cover that came back was native.
You can see the ilima coming up through over here, the naio. This is the puakala. Here we have some veil. This plant here is koko'olau.
The native forest systems are the most efficient and productive at gathering water and putting it into the ground.
The vegetation plays a really key role there in terms of not only reducing the impacts of the rainfall events, but also reducing the sediment.
As restoration happens, we have so much less mud, like so much less sediment is coming down from Kawela. So it's reduced by 80 to 90% from when we started. Like really, Kawela is much healthier these days. Come on in. But the whole south shore of Molokai suffers from similar problems. The other watersheds, all indicators suggest that they're getting worse over time, not better. So we're studying not just Kawela, but around Kawela as well, going from Kamalo all the way to the pier. So we can see if Kawela in particular is having an impact on water quality. So this is the GPS we'll use. Okay. This is how I actually look for fresh water myself.
It's still not clear in terms of how long sediment stays on the reef. And so what you have is you have this sediment coming down. It gets buffered into a system that takes, maybe 5-10 years to flush out finally, but you're still getting more coming down all the time. And so even if we were able to turn down the erosion, it's still not going to be an immediate solution to reducing the sediment.
So there's an improvement on land, but not too much improvement in the ocean. Because we get the reef, and everything that came down on the reef never really get washed away, because our system out here only allow the outside, the current, where the current stay, to flush. Everything that I do, I include nature in the equation, because nature is what providing us with all these answers and questions. And I'm gonna be honest, there's some stuff I don't understand about climate change that's happening right now.
The climate change issues for coral reefs would be things like sea level rise, as well as erosion, especially temperature increases and the changing chemistry of the oceans.
A lot of the models are showing that there is going to be some real big changes, and some of the biggest changes are going to be in the dry areas, and dry areas are going to get drier.
And the way that the storms just sit might be a little bit more. And so what that means though is that when the water comes, it feels like it's just big and concentrated in places that it hadn't been before.
The big rain we had last year, my yard, and 6 to 8 inches of mud. It was just, never saw that before.
It's a very complex mixture of functions that are going on here. We've had climate change, decreased rainfall, increased drought, alteration of vegetation patterns on the landscape. We're seeing the deer kind of move back into some of the realm where the goat used to occupy. We also see them creating new hotspots of vegetation loss, especially near the residential areas and adjacent lowland areas where they can seek refuge.
I appreciate the efforts of the hunters who are out there trying to bring the population down, but I think more has to be done.
So the work isn't done, but Kawela watershed, at the very least, has seen improvement over time.
To make sure that the success does occur, it's important to have that knowledge from the community of the people that are there day in and day out and can see the changes to certain species of fishes, to the corals, to all these things, and make the connections as to what they think might be important in putting it together.
I do hope that my children will one day be able to do all the things that I got to do, in the ocean, and that they will be able to see that native life come back.
You can bring them back. We just gotta learn how to do all this. And a lot of it has to do with our practices, our way of managing, so that these resources can be sustainable for many, many generations.